Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Unitarian Universalist Church West. I'm the Reverend Suzelle Lynch, and it's good to be here with you today, along with my worship co-leaders, Dave Cicero, our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, and Chelsey Nisbet, leader of our Gen UU group for people who are in their 20s and 30s. Kelly Bognar, our publications coordinator, is also with us managing the technology that makes this live stream possible. We welcome you to this hour of community and belonging, where we lift up the way of the full heart and giving hands, the way of the open mind and compassionate spirit. Welcome to this time where we give our energy to greater possibility and seek fuel for our journey toward greater wholeness.
We now begin, as we begin all our gatherings, by lighting the chalice, symbol of our faith. Wisdom is a gift. We pass it on to each other like a precious jewel. We share advice generously, hoping others won't make the mistakes we made. But wisdom is not something we can collect. Rather, it collects us, gathers us, and connects us, one to another. We light this chalice to honor wisdom.
Hi there. For Worship for All Ages today, I have a song that I'd like to teach you. It was written by my friend and colleague, the Reverend Mary Gregolia, and it celebrates our bodies. And since we're talking about the wisdom in every body this morning, I thought this would be a great song for us to do together. So there's also some hand motions that go along with this song. So I thought that I would show you those first and walk through the words with you. So let's try that first, and then I'll start our accompaniment, which was recorded by Jen Nicolosi, our lead music director. So here's how the words go. Every bone and muscle in this beautiful body says yes to myself, says yes to myself. That's part one. And then part two goes, yes includes the feeling, I need you, please hold me. Yes includes the feeling, I need you, please hold. So we'll do part one, part two, part one, part two, and then part one twice. So let's give that a try with the music. Here it comes. Every bone and muscle in this beautiful body says yes to myself, says yes to myself. Yes includes the feeling, I need you, please hold me. Yes includes the feeling, I need you, please hold. Every bone and muscle in this beautiful body says yes to myself, says yes to myself. Yes includes a feeling, I need you, please hold me. Yes includes the feeling, I need you, please hold. Every bone and muscle in this beautiful body says yes to myself, says yes to myself. Every bone and muscle in this beautiful body says yes to
now I invite you to join with me in our time of spoken and musical meditation. I have a prayer to share with you that's been adapted from the words of the Reverend Matt Elsbach. And then we will hear sketch number 1 from the Hungarian Unitarian composer Béla Bartók, one of his 7 sketches, which will be performed on the piano by UUCW youth group member Spencer Harris. So please make yourself comfortable. Join your heart and your mind with mine. I call to the spirit of life and love, and the spirit, the breath of life in everyone who hears my voice in this moment. I ask you and invite you to breathe with me. Breathe with me. Inhale, inspire, breathe in inspiration. Breathe out, remembering connection. Breathe with me. Know that each breath we take in molecules of air that were breathed by every person who ever lived. Breathe in the essence of the Buddha, of Moses, of Muhammad, the essence of Jesus. Breathe in the air we share with all the teachers, great and small, past and present, known and unknown. The air we share with all living things. Breathe with me and know that we are interdependent, for the spirit of life flows through us all. Breathe with me, remembering the sacred work of interconnection and relationship. Work we now do apart, but still connected in hope and promise, in mystery and meaning. Breathe with me. And as you breathe, listen to the spirit within you and to the beauty of the music beyond.
The wisdom in every body. Right now, as COVID-19 spreads across our community, it might seem ironic to be speaking about the wisdom in every body. So many people have body-based fears right now. We're afraid to get the virus and afraid to be the one who passes it along to someone who could be terribly vulnerable to it. The intention that Chelsey and I have for our time together is that it will nurture all of us, that it will be a time that reassures us of the goodness of all our bodies in the midst of our current challenges. As we begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Chelsey. She's an advanced practice social worker currently serving in the field of veterinary medicine. She's also an adjunct professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Chelsey is passionate about diversity and justice, and she speaks her truth with grace. She's been a member of UUCW for almost exactly 1 year. And this service grew out of a conversation that she and I had over coffee not long after she joined. Welcome, Chelsey.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Suzelle. Good morning, everyone. As I begin, I want to tell you that I come to this work with my own experiences around body discrimination. I identify as fat and feel passionately about the subject. While the conclusions I will share with you are based in research, I'm also reflecting on my experiences and sharing my truth. That being said, I do need to acknowledge my privilege. Others have certainly preceded me in speaking to the ideas of body positivity and size diversity. Black women especially, and women of color in general, have paved the way. This body positivity movement is also not a trend, but a movement that's been alive for decades. Diving in, we know that we all have unconscious biases, from the neighborhood that we choose, to the close friends that we have, to the people we date. Gender, ethnicity, disability, sexuality, body size, profession, and more all influence the assessments that we make of people and form the basis of our relationship with others and with the world at large. Though most of us have difficulty accepting or acknowledging this, we all do it, usually outside of our own conscious awareness. Developments in neuroscience now demonstrate that many biases are formed early in life by parental conditioning and held firmly in our subconscious minds throughout life by societal expectations. We gather millions of bits of information and our brain processes that information in a certain way, unconsciously categorizing and formatting it into familiar patterns. Certain bodies will always be viewed as non-normative or othered according to white supremacist ideals. And this is apparent when we look to our cultural texts throughout history: film, television, literature, folklore, and more. These biases are covert and socially accepted. I want to bring awareness to that dynamic today and loudly and confidently affirm people who exist in bodies that are marginalized, while also challenging the ideologies that directly impact them. Do you ever think critically of your own body or someone else's? I think of size. I also think of ageism here. When you find yourself doing this, ask yourself, where is this feeling coming from? Spoiler alert, it's usually diet culture whispering in your ear, attacking your sense of self. Diet culture literally wants us to buy in to spending our whole lives thinking we're broken. We're born into the idea we need to be smaller. Someone in a thin or smaller body may be teased, bullied, or discriminated against for not possessing a certain body type. For women, this is historically associated with femininity in the male gaze. I have friends who have shared experiences around teasing and comments about their small body size, and we need to recognize that being underweight has its own set of challenges and bias. And it also isn't the same as the structural and far-reaching bias that we know exists against fat bodies. With the exception of Michigan and cities like San Francisco and Washington, D.C., people who are overweight are not a protected class throughout most of the US. meaning it is technically legal to discriminate against someone based on his or her weight. So this is the bigger issue. If someone is blatantly discriminated against, there's no legal recourse. It seems like it might be common sense, but it's not included in civil rights protections. When we see diversity trainings, we don't hear body size or body shape talked about, even though it is a diversity and inclusion issue. This can lead to a blind spot in education and trainings. Workplaces may address microaggressions and hostile behavior related to race, gender, and religion, but few address how this behavior relates to size. Why? Well, in our culture, there's this idea that a person with a large body should be able to control their weight and size. They are blamed for the discrimination they face. With racial discrimination, it's different. It's pretty agreed upon that someone cannot choose or change their race. The irony is that discrimination, including against body size, results in the poor health outcomes that a person in a large body may be being judged for. That's why we need this type of discourse about body and size diversity to fight against bias. I'm going to list some things fat people are unfairly and discriminatorily judged for: sitting, eating, moving, not moving, flying, eating out, wearing clothes, wearing too little clothes, being sick, existing, advocating for themselves, being upset with the way they are treated. This is where the concept of being fat positive comes in. Fat positivity sees a person as a whole, complex human being. It's a humanistic term. It restores a sense of humanity to a person whose body size is stereotypically seen as a collection of moral failings. Weight or size, after all, is just a small piece among the many, many pieces that make up who we are. However, this small piece has largely taken priority over all the other pieces. When we make assumptions based on someone's weight or size, we stop seeing that person as a whole, and this manifests in the way we perceive and treat them. It's like judging a book by its cover. Some people react negatively to the term fat positive, thinking that it means fat is good. Fat positivity actually means challenging the negative assessment many of us automatically make about fat people. Fat positivity doesn't mean fat is good or fat is bad, or fat is loved or fat is hated. It means fat is, and fat is valid. It doesn't mean fat is healthy or unhealthy. It doesn't play into black and white thinking. If you're a fat positive healthcare provider, for example, it doesn't mean you're an enabler, being irresponsible, or dismissing your education. Being fat positive means one doesn't discriminate or place their negative weight bias on their relationship with others, personally or professionally. It means one works on their internalized weight bias instead of projecting it out. Fat or body positivity is a counterposition to the dominant idea that people in fat bodies are problems to be fixed. The idea that certain bodies are more worthy than others is everywhere, even in spaces that claim to promote health and wellness. It's difficult to see this because we're so accustomed to seeing it. But think about it. Whose bodies are used to convey normalcy and perfection? What body types are we conditioned to be inspired by? Which body types are we encouraged to avoid? So, in honor of this wisdom, what are we to do and not do? First, don't comment on people's weight. In my experience, for some reason, people feel more inclined to comment on this than anything else. Even if a comment is directed to someone else and not to yourself, if you are of a similar weight status as the person being commented on, it's difficult to not apply the comment to yourself, especially if it's a negative comment. And even positive comments have a cutting edge. When I hear diet talk, when I hear you look great, I hear you were disgusting before, and that you're doing everything possible to avoid looking even a little bit like me. Avoid saying, I look fat, or I feel fat. Fat is not a feeling, by the way. I shouldn't eat this. I should start working out. Crop my arm out of that picture. My arm looks huge. Research tells us that many people who hold anti-fat attitudes believe that weight is readily controllable. They see this as fact, not as bias. Anti-fat attitudes are also linked to a belief that weight is inextricably linked to health. But truthfully, we have to understand that the $60+ billion diet industry has convinced us that bias against larger bodies is the norm. The fact is, when we perceive something as truth, we are less likely to recognize a belief as prejudiced. Folks will use claims of truth to mask or hide from accusations and spotlighting of prejudicial thoughts, behaviors, and actions. Discrimination causes more harm than weight ever will. Discrimination, whether it hides in the guise of health concerns or expresses itself as blatant anti-fat rhetoric, serves no purpose other than to undermine another human being. The connection between health and weight is far more tenuous and complex than often portrayed. Social position, racism, environment, unemployment, education, early childhood, working conditions, trauma exposure responses, disability, often play larger roles in both health and weight than does our ability or choice to maintain a healthy, quote unquote, healthy diet and exercise. It's dangerous to assume that someone's weight is a massive health risk and is simply up to them to change. Weight discrimination is dangerous because it increases a person's anxiety and reduces the likelihood that a person will access healthcare. It places untold emotional, psychological, and physical stress on an individual. Weight discrimination marginalizes and silences the experiences and barriers that people of larger sizes face. It denies people appropriate emotional and social support. It dehumanizes people and denies them a life without fear of judgment. It ignores the qualities they have, which are so valuable to society. Weight discrimination denies people of all sizes the resources needed to mitigate health risks. That's the reason we need to question the things we believe about people who are larger. It's why we need to understand that we will always project our own fears onto others unless we examine them. Let's celebrate uniqueness and honor and love our bodies. They are a gift.
Thank you. Thank you, Chelsey. I wonder if you're wondering where all of this immense prejudice and bias in our Western culture against larger bodies, especially against women with larger bodies, I wonder if you're wondering where that's based. I know that it's based in what I call bad theology. Most of us probably don't think to dig into theology as the deeper source of our cultural obsession with body size. But truly, it's those ancient Christian ideas about sin and pleasure and restraint that lie beneath the culture of dieting, fat phobia, and obsessive focus on fitness that surrounds us today. It pretty much all began when Christianity first began to spread and separate itself from Judaism during the first century before the Common Era. At that time, Greek philosophy entered Christian thought through the letters of Paul, the great saint of the early Christian church. Specifically, Paul was invested in a particular kind of dualism, the idea that the physical body and the human soul are separate from one another. This thought came from the Greek philosopher Plato, who taught that the ideal, the essence of a thing, was more perfect than any physical specific example of that thing in the real world could ever be. Thus, the soul or spirit was more worthy than its physical shadow. As Christianity spread, the idea that mind and soul are somehow higher and more pure than body also began to spread. Heaven, home of the soul, and eventually of the weightless resurrected body, emerged as a better place than earth, where our physical bodies exist. Christianity didn't have to go this way. The creation narratives in Genesis declare again and again that the material world is good. Those scriptures name birds, rocks, trees, air, fish, and flesh. They name all of these as good. The Garden of Eden is an earthly paradise filled with delicious things to eat. Enter the early Christian theologians' interpretation of the story of Adam and Eve, and the whole thing gets worse. Dr. Hannah Bacon, acting head of theology and religious studies at the University of Chester in England, notes that 2nd century theologian Basil of Caesarea contended that it was gluttony that betrayed Adam to death and brought wickedness upon the world, thanks to the lust of the belly. For Basil, known to history as Basil the Great, mastery over one's appetite would lead to a life in paradise, and failure to master one's appetite was a sure route toward death and hell. Eve, in particular, came to symbolize the dangers of appetite and desire. Tertullian, a contemporary of Basil, who was called the father of Western Christianity, took this further by casting all women in the role of Eve. He asserted that women were the devil's gateway and ultimately responsible for causing the death of Christ. A century later, Augustine asserted that the serpent approached Eve first in the garden because she was less rational and more susceptible to deception. Eating for pleasure was irrational. It was considered the behavior of animals, not human beings. Over the centuries, terrible consequences have come down to us due to body-soul dualism. Sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, the colonization and genocide of indigenous people, all of these rise from the same roots that sprouted our culture of body size bias. Because bodies were labeled as a source of temptation and shame and had to be rigidly controlled, folks that the European colonizers and invaders encountered who had less shame-based attitudes about the body were viewed as inferior. And because those peoples were inferior and not fully human, they were subject to slaughter and enslavement. Speaking theologically, it could have been otherwise. Scholar Deborah Sawyer suggests a different interpretation for the story of Eve, that Eve's eating of the forbidden fruit leads to apotheosis. By eating, Eve came to possess knowledge that utterly transformed the meaning of being human. She and Adam became wiser, more godlike, more fully realized, more fully whole. And part of that wholeness was the desire for more. Appetite, reviled in traditional Christian theology, is actually our human passion for wholeness. Imagine what a different world that theology would have created. A culture that says our bodies, our appetites, our fabulous fleshiness are inherently part of growing in soul, growing in depth. A culture of embodied spirituality, because there is no spiritual treasure to be found apart from the bodily experiences of human life on this planet. Imagine a culture that values all bodies. With our deep investment in diet culture and fitness culture, driven by capitalism and patriarchy, I wonder if we can even imagine this other world. But imagine it we must. I love this alternate theology. It speaks to every one of us because we all experience the world through a body. With our bodies, we touch and taste, we experience pleasure and pain, we create, we make love, we hug our children. In her book, Divining the Body, author Jan Phillips says, we need to climb back into our bodies and honor them as instruments of our souls. Body positivity can help us begin to repair what cultures and creeds have torn asunder. As we do, the meaning we seek, the justice that we long to help create, the deep joy that we're after, these things begin to manifest. In other words, it's our bodies, all of our bodies, your body, my body, all bodies. It is our bodies that have the wisdom we need to help heal a hurting world.
If you take away nothing else today, remember all bodies are good bodies. Health is not a moral good, and we all deserve to take up space. People deserve human rights and respect no matter their size or the status of their health. Liberate yourself from the idea that what your body looks like says anything about your worth. Learning to kindly be with our bodies is brave and wise, and at times goes against everything we've learned. Take comfort in your body and bask and ease in to the wisdom of treating it with kindness and love.
Yes. To celebrate our bodies and our ministry of body positivity and our ministry with one another, we have a song to share with you, a hymn that you can sing along with. It's called Wake Now My Senses, and it was composed by Thomas Michelson to an Irish melody. And the version we have to share with you was performed and recorded by Daniel Wiebe.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor, both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience with justice not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
It's time to close and extinguish the flame in our chalice. And we return once again to our words about being a people of wisdom. Wisdom is a gift. We pass it on to each other like a precious jewel. We share advice generously, hoping others won't make the mistakes that we made. But wisdom isn't something we can collect. Rather, it collects us, gathers us, and connects us one to another. In a moment, we'll extinguish the chalice, but we hope that you will take the wisdom of this time with you out into the world. It has been good to be together. Shalom, blessed be, Ashe, and Amen.
We now end by extinguishing this light until next time.